The day I came home from deployment was supposed to be the moment that made all the sacrifices worth it. Months of dust, noise, and sleepless nights had lived in my bones, but I carried myself through the front door with one clear picture in my mind. My wife running toward me, my baby in her arms. World finally settling back into place. My duffel bag hit the floor with a dull thud, and for a split second, everything felt quiet, almost unreal. The house smelled the same, familiar and comforting, like I had never left. That illusion lasted only a heartbeat. I heard laughter from the living room, not my wife's soft laugh, but something deeper, careless, and wrong. My chest tightened, the kind of instinctive alertness drilled into me overseas, snapping awake. I moved forward slowly, each step heavier than the last, my mind already trying to make excuses for what I was about to see. Maybe it was family, maybe a neighbor, anything but what my gut was screaming. When I turned the corner, time broke. There was a man sitting on my couch, relaxed, comfortable, like he belonged there. In his arms was my baby. My baby, he was bouncing her gently, smiling down at her with a familiarity that made my vision blur. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room felt too small, the air thick and crushing. My hands clenched on instinct, my entire body flooding with heat, adrenaline, and disbelief. He looked up and froze when he saw me. His face drained of color, eyes wide, like a thief caught mid-act. That was when my wife appeared from the kitchen. The smile on her face died instantly. No words came out. None were needed. In that silence, everything I feared, everything I had pushed aside during long nights overseas, crashed down on me at once. I thought of every missed call, every delayed message, every excuse about being tired or busy. I thought of the days I counted down to coming home, believing I was fighting for my family, for our future. Standing there, watching another man hold my child like it was normal, like it was deserved, something inside me cracked open. The shock wasn't loud. It didn't come with yelling or dramatic movement. It was cold, sharp, and absolute. My training taught me how to stay calm under fire, how to assess threats without emotion, and in that moment, that training betrayed me by keeping me eerily still. I felt disconnected from my body, like I was watching someone else's life unravel. My baby reached out toward me, confused by the tension, unaware of the war happening inside her father. That small gesture grounded me in a way nothing else could. The pain wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about loss of trust, of home, of the life I believed I was coming back to. The moment that should have been my happiest reunion became the point where everything changed, where the man who walked in the door quietly disappeared, and someone harder, more controlled, took his place. The betrayal didn't announce itself with shouting or excuses. It sat there between us, heavy and undeniable, growing larger with every second of silence. I looked at my wife, searching her face for anything that could soften what I had just seen: shock, guilt, fear, remorse, but what I found hurt even more. There was familiarity in her posture, a kind of ease that told me this wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake made yesterday. This was something that had been living in my home while I was halfway across the world. My mind replayed memories I had once cherished. Video calls where she smiled but seemed distracted, messages that felt shorter, colder, times when I blamed the distance, the stress, the baby. Standing there now, the truth rearranged those memories into something ugly and clear. She hadn't been lonely. She hadn't been struggling alone. She had replaced me. The worst part wasn't the man himself. He was just a symptom. The real wound came from realizing that the person I trusted most had opened the door and invited betrayal inside. I had trusted her with my heart, my name, my child. I had trusted her while I walked into danger, believing that at least my home was safe. That belief shattered quietly, but completely. Seeing another man hold my baby twisted something deep inside my chest. It wasn't jealousy alone, it was violation. Fatherhood is sacred in ways words fail to capture. That child was supposed to know my arms, my voice, my presence. Instead, while I was gone, someone else had stepped into moments that were meant to be mine. First smiles, first laughs, ordinary days that suddenly felt stolen. I thought about the promises we made before I deployed. About loyalty, about waiting, about building a future no matter how hard the distance became. Those promises now felt like lies she had told easily, maybe even convincingly, while knowing she had already broken them. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. Anger fades, disrespect doesn't. Trust isn't something that breaks all at once. It fractures in layers. In that moment, every layer collapsed. I no longer questioned whether she loved me. I questioned whether she had ever respected me, whether my absence had made me disposable, whether the uniform I wore, the risks I took, had meant anything to the person who was supposed to stand behind me. The room felt smaller as the truth settled in. I wasn't just a husband who had been cheated on. I was a man who had been replaced in his own life. The sense of home I carried with me through every dangerous night overseas disappeared. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was a lie I had been clinging to. That was when the betrayal fully took shape, not as a moment, but as a realization. This wasn't about love lost. It was about trust destroyed, boundaries crossed, and a line erased that could never be redrawn. And once I understood that, I knew there was no going back to who I had been before I walked through that door. What kept me standing in that moment wasn't love or anger alone. It was something deeper, something carved into me long before deployment. Identity, honor, the invisible code I had lived by since the day I put on the uniform. Being a soldier isn't just a job, it becomes the framework through which you understand yourself. Discipline, loyalty, accountability. Those values don't switch off when you come home. They follow you into marriage, into fatherhood, into every promise you make. As I stood there, watching my world tilt off its axis, I felt an internal conflict unlike anything I had faced overseas. In combat, threats are clear, lines are drawn, you know who you are and what you must do. This was different. This was personal. This was an attack not on my body, but on my dignity, on the role I believed I held as a husband and a father. There's a silent expectation placed on men like me, to endure, to absorb pain, to remain composed no matter what. I had learned to control fear under fire, to keep my emotions locked down so they wouldn't compromise the mission. But standing in my own living room, I realized the mission had changed. It was no longer about survival. It was about self-respect. Honor isn't about violence or dominance. It's about knowing where you stand and refusing to let that position be erased. In that moment, I understood that allowing myself to be diminished, to be treated as a replaceable figure, would be a betrayal of myself. Not just as a man, but as a father whose child deserved a parent with a spine. I thought about my baby again. One day, she would look back and form her understanding of strength from the choices I made now. Strength wasn't screaming. It wasn't losing control. Strength was clarity. It was boundaries. It was the refusal to accept humiliation disguised as circumstance. I didn't want her to grow up thinking love meant tolerance of disrespect. My military identity gave me something crucial in that moment: restraint. It stopped me from reacting emotionally and taught me to observe, to evaluate. I realized that my power didn't lie in confrontation. It lay in composure. The calm to walk away from chaos without losing myself. The resolve to protect my future, even if it meant dismantling my past. Masculinity is often misunderstood as aggression, but true masculinity is accountability. It's knowing when something is broken beyond repair and having the courage to acknowledge it. I didn't feel weak for being hurt. I felt human. What mattered was what I did next. As a soldier, I had been trained to rebuild under pressure, to adapt when plans collapse. That same mindset applied here. My marriage as I knew it was over, but my identity wasn't. My role as a father wasn't. My sense of honor didn't depend on anyone else's choices. In that quiet realization, I reclaimed something important. They could take my trust, my peace, even my home, but they couldn't take my self-respect unless I gave it to them. And I wasn't going to. Revenge didn't arrive as a burst of rage or a dramatic confrontation. It came slowly, settling into me with a cold, deliberate calm. The phrase "I ruined them" wasn't about fists, threats, or chaos. It was about control, about taking back power in a situation where I had been blindsided. Emotional release doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks quiet, precise, and irreversible. In the days that followed, I said very little. Silence became my shield. While they waited for an explosion, for anger they could point to and justify, I chose distance instead. Distance gave me clarity. Every conversation, every interaction was measured. I watched how easily lies continued to form, how excuses stacked on top of each other like they could rebuild what had already collapsed. That only confirmed what I already knew. There was no remorse, only fear of consequences. Revenge, for me, was reclaiming my narrative. I stopped reacting and started acting. I documented everything: timelines, messages, patterns. Truth has weight, and once gathered, it becomes impossible to ignore. I didn't need to exaggerate or twist facts. Reality was damaging enough on its own. Their comfort depended on secrecy, and secrecy was the one thing I could remove. The emotional release came from watching their confidence fade. The man who once sat comfortably on my couch now avoided eye contact, his presence shrinking every time our paths crossed. My wife, who once spoke with certainty, now hesitated, her words careful and defensive. They weren't facing my anger. They were facing accountability. And accountability is far more terrifying than rage. There was power in choosing myself. I focused on my child, on building a future that didn't depend on people who had already proven unreliable. That shift alone disrupted everything. They expected me to beg, to negotiate, to cling to what we used to be. Instead, I detached. I made it clear through actions, not threats, that access to me, to my time, my trust, my protection, was no longer guaranteed. Revenge also meant exposure, but not recklessly. Truth found its way to the right ears at the right time. Families, legal channels, social circles that once offered silent approval now had to confront reality. Lies don't survive daylight. Watching the carefully constructed image of innocence collapse was strangely freeing. I didn't have to destroy anything. They dismantled themselves trying to defend the indefensible. What surprised me most was how light I felt. Letting go of the need for emotional validation released me from their control. Revenge wasn't about seeing them suffer. It was about no longer suffering myself. The moment I stopped centering my pain around their actions, I won. I ruined them. Wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the natural outcome of truth meeting consequence. They lost the comfort of deception. I regained my peace. And in that exchange, I finally understood that the strongest revenge isn't retaliation. It's rebuilding a life so solid that betrayal has no place left to land. The power of this story lies not just in what happened, but in how it's told. Every word of the title is engineered to pull the reader straight into emotional conflict. It doesn't ask for attention, it takes it, the first, third-person perspective makes it intimate, almost confessional, as if the reader has stumbled into someone else's worst day. That immediacy is what makes people stop scrolling. It feels real, raw, and urgent. The opening line alone sets the hook. "I came home from deployment," instantly establishes sacrifice, discipline, and distance. It signals that the narrator has already paid a price before the story even begins. Audiences are naturally inclined to empathize with someone who has served, someone who has endured hardship for the sake of family. That emotional credit makes the betrayal hit harder when it arrives. Then comes the shock image, another man holding the baby. This isn't just infidelity, it's symbolic violation. The baby represents innocence, legacy, and continuity. By placing the lover in that role, the story strikes multiple emotional triggers at once: jealousy, anger, heartbreak, and identity loss. Readers don't need details yet. Their imagination fills in the pain. That's why the title works so well. It lets the audience complete the story emotionally before they even click. The phrase, "my wife's lover," is deliberately blunt. There's no softening language, no attempt at justification. It frames the situation as a clear moral breach. This clarity is essential for virality. In high engagement content, audiences want to know who to side with quickly. The title removes ambiguity and invites the reader to stand with the narrator. Finally, the closing promise, "I ruined them," delivers anticipation. It signals payoff. In a digital space crowded with unresolved pain stories, this line tells the audience they won't be left hanging. There will be justice, consequences, and emotional resolution. Whether that revenge is legal, social, emotional, or personal doesn't matter at this stage. What matters is the assurance that the victim does not remain powerless. This structure is why the title performs so well in storytelling niches like YouTube narration, Reddit-style confessions, and short-form reels. It follows a proven emotional arc: sacrifice, shock, betrayal, and comeback. Each element escalates tension without giving too much away. Viewers click because they want to know how someone survives that kind of moment, and how they turn it around. The language is simple but loaded. There's no poetry, no over-explanation. That simplicity makes it accessible to a wide audience, especially viewers who consume content quickly and emotionally rather than analytically. The title doesn't just describe a story, it sells an experience. In the end, the appeal comes from one universal truth. People are drawn to stories where humiliation is transformed into strength. This title promises exactly that. It tells the audience, you will witness betrayal, but you will also witness control being taken back. And that promise is what keeps people watching, reading, and sharing until the very last word.